Poland for clients in Sweden and in the USA. We're just a software development and testing company. About halfway through the year, we decided that we wanted to invest in robotic process automation as a new area of specialization for us. And so I asked around, and I know some guys in RPA in the UK, and I was advised that our speaker, Dan Atkins, is the best RPA developer in the United Kingdom. So I decided that's the guy I want to work with. So we flew out, we met, we went out to Wales, we met. We are cooperating now, so I'd like to introduce Dan, who will come and do his presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Cheers. Okay. As Angelo said, my name is Dan Atkins. I have been a developer for more years than I care to remember at this stage. My first project was Y2K, believe it or not. I know I don't look old enough, but it is true. I started pretty much straight out of uni, straight into development in the financial services and banking sectors. Post Y2K, which was what we were really worried about at the time, the next big thing that came up was automation and how can we automate all these incredibly mundane tasks. And I've been looking at that ever since. I haven't really stepped out of that space. RPA, as of late, has been becoming a very popular buzzword, although this technology has been around for many, many years. It's just in recent times it's been nicely packaged off and given over to people who are maybe not so technical as ourselves as developers. Some of these slides I am going to skip past, so we'll move straight on to the meat of the presentation. So. As Angelo said, I worked for the Bank of Ireland, because I'm from Dublin originally. I worked for Microsoft for quite a long time. I've worked for some quite big corporations over the years. I started Sonic Software about 2 years ago with the idea of having a bespoke software house that pretty much could turn its hand to anything. And automation being one of our streams. So we pride ourselves on being small and being approachable and cutting down on a lot of the red tape that you need to cut through to get to the bones of a project that you can only really get with a smaller software house. So about me, worked in encryption databases, lots of other services, AI. I built my first program on a ZX Spectrum with 16K's worth of memory. I've been a programmer ever since. Like I said, my first project was Y2K. Banking, databases, all that sort of stuff is where I kind of grew up and got to where I am today. Okay, so what is RPA? So, as I said, we have this buzzword that has come up as of late, which is robotic process automation. And if we read the terminology, and you can see here, so it's the application of technology to capture and interpret existing applications for processing a transaction, manipulating data, triggering responses, and communicating with other digital systems. So essentially what that is, if you take the really awful jobs that people do, what we would term the swivel chair sorts of jobs, so data entry and that sort of thing, and build a capability, a software capability that is able to intelligently do that, and that's essentially what RPA is. When I first started doing automation, we didn't have any out-of-the-box software. Okay, and we're going to talk about some of the out-of-the-box software as we move on. So things like UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, Work Fusion. These are all the newer pieces of technology that have come onto the market as of late that enable people to be able to quickly automate their own systems in their own industries. So there is some misconceptions about RPA. The biggest one that I find, especially talking to clients, is a lot of people are under the impression that if you take some RPA software, that you are automating a build. Okay, you're not automating a build at all. In fact, the software life cycle still applies to an RPA build. Okay, now it is condensed. However, it does still apply. There's less testing time. I don't believe so. Testing time, in a lot of cases, is increased. Okay, because a lot of this stuff is going to be running headless inside some infrastructure where it's never going to be watched. Okay, so as we know with the old macros and especially with the older kinds of automating software, they can run haywire and do some quite serious damage to your systems. Another one is that you don't need to be technical to be able to implement these. To a degree, I believe you do have to have some technology background to be able to put together. Now, the analysis of the original process that's going to be automated, no, probably not. But to actually do a build and deploy an enterprise-level robotic capability, you would need to have some technical knowledge. Once the build is completed, that's it. Not really, no. Once the build is completed, there's always going to be more to it. There's always going to be change requests. Hopefully there's not always going to be bugs, but there can be. You don't need an orchestration expert. So an orchestration expert is the person who runs the robot, so the conductor, so to speak, of all the robotics that a company has running. Mentioned software lifecycle, anyone can do it. It's similar to a macro. It's not really similar to a macro. A lot of companies that I go out to and see, that's the first thing they say, is this is just a macro recorder, isn't it? And it's not, okay? You only need one bit of software and anything can be automated. It's getting better over the years. The industry has gotten very good at automating a lot of technology. However, there are still some types of systems out there that are not suitable for automation just yet. Okay, so where is RPA used? Primarily, it's used all over the place, but primarily we're talking about banking, finance, insurance services, healthcare, HR, procurement, finance departments is always a good place to start. When we start to look at processes that are going to be automated, we generally look for the low-hanging fruit to begin with. So when a company wants to invest in a licensed piece of software, they want to automate things very, very quickly so that they can show the benefit of it to their executives. And usually that begins in the finance department because that usually consists of a lot of Excel spreadsheets and a lot of people typing into various different systems. Okay, so why would we implement RPA? The cost versus a large-scale IT project is minimal. To implement a large ETL run for a new system is going to be significantly more, and it's also going to be significantly more dangerous than using an RPA to do a more limited run to move data from one system to another. You can redeploy the people, and this to me is the most important thing. Whenever I talk to executives in companies, they always say the same thing: how many people can we get? Can we cut? Okay, and you hear about it in the news all the time. Okay, is culling FTEs? Okay, and that is not the case. And in fact, I have not seen that ever happen. as of yet in the industry. Usually what happens is the people who do those mundane jobs end up getting redeployed into more high-value roles, okay? Because as an employer, I want to keep the people that I have. They're the most important part of my business, okay? That is where all my knowledge is, my knowledge base. So I'm not ever going to look at replacing people with robots. It's nonsensical, and like I said, I've just never seen it happen. Wide range of automation, rapid return on investment, absolutely. So the cost of a license for an out-of-the-box piece of software, or to come to a bespoke software house like ourselves, compared to a large-scale IT project, is huge because the build life cycle is condensed. Okay, the scalability and the improved analytics as well. So usually, again, when we go out to these big corporations, generally they don't really know what's going on in their own business anyway. Okay, and after you produce a set of robots that do a bunch of standardized tasks, okay, that then give you back a set of analytics, they have a much broader picture of what their business is going to be like. For example, I did one in a bank quite recently where we had a call center, and customers ring in and they complain about the banks, okay? Something happened to my account, or there's money missing. Now, in the situation where the value of that transaction is less than £100, okay, the bank will automatically pay you £100, okay, to satisfy your complaint. I won't tell you which bank. So we were to look at putting in some robotic process automation. So when an agent takes a call and the complaint is less than £100, okay, a series of events happen, and the machine, the robot, takes over, right? Bungs £100 into the person's account, and everyone's happy. Okay? Now, it was interesting because what ended up happening is we did all our testing, okay, and we hit exactly the same numbers as their agents would, given the circumstances. Now, when they put it into production, though, what they didn't think of was empathy. Okay, so there were certain complaints that if you make them black and white, the person will not get that £100. Okay. However, the person they're talking to may hear things slightly differently than the way the robot may process rules. Okay, so there's things like that to think about, and these are certainly more into the challenges. So black and white rules-based processing can be very different to the way we as people think about things. Okay, scope creep, added complexity. Well, that's the same as any large-scale programming project. I mean, scope creep, especially because generally, when we go into these places to do this, we're going to be talking to the business people. Okay, so they may not necessarily understand the black and white rules. Okay, automating inherently poor process elements. So very often, a company will pick a process to automate, but not actually know how that process works or what it's supposed to do. And that's something that we come across time and time again. So we imagine I go to a finance department to write a robot that takes information from Excel and types it into an invoicing system. Okay, quite boring, I know, but that's usually where we start. Okay, now Mary may do it very, very differently to David. Okay, and the SME, the guy who's running the department, may not know how to do it at all. Okay, so a lot of the time, the analysis phase of these projects takes a lot longer than the actual software build. Okay, so we've got some stats here. About 60% of occupations could have 30% or more of their activities automated. I don't know, probably true. The Institute of RPA estimates that 20% of a company's labor costs could be saved by using RPA. This is not the same as getting rid of staff, that's saving on labor costs. Save 2 trillion in annual wages. I'm not sure about that one. Okay, so beginning the RPA journey. Okay, so where do we start with this stuff? So generally, you're going to have somebody at an executive level has been to a conference, not unlike this one, and has been talking to somebody about robotics and how much money it can save. Okay, and they begin an RPA project to save all this money. And these are the kind of the steps that we go through to get there. So first is going to be our discovery phase. Okay, so we look through the processes to find viable candidates for automation. One of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest mistakes that I see time and time again, is that companies will come along and look at a process without scratching the surface and not realize that it's not really viable for automation in the first place. Okay, so something like a Citrix application is going to be very, very difficult to automate compared to a desktop application. Okay, targeted processes should benefit the organization and stakeholders the most. Okay, so absolutely. So you need to target, the first ones we need to target are the ones that, like I said before, the low-hanging fruit. So these are the ones that are going to give a return on investment straight away. Okay, they're going to see the benefit of this straight away. Okay, assessment. Once we've narrowed down a few candidates, assessments need to be carried out. Okay, so we need to have a look at the process. Okay, not to be confused with the target or source system, but the process. So this is still the analysis phase that we're looking at. Okay, all departments that are affected need to be informed and approve the implementation of automation. So the biggest blocker usually in these projects is the IT department. Okay, they get very, very nervous about this idea of having a robot service running inside the estate that's completely autonomous. Okay, we put together a business case, and then we try and sell the automation to the business stakeholders and the management. Vendor selection. Okay, we've mentioned this before. The vendor of choice is going to depend entirely on the organization and the processes that we're looking at. People often say to me, okay, what is the best RPA software? There's no answer to that. Okay, they're all very good for different things. In the same way that programming languages are all very good for different things. Okay, so we may not necessarily ever have a vendor of choice in an organization. In fact, we may have several different vendors, and in some cases, we may not have a vendor at all. It might be prudent to do the automation in its pure programming form. Okay. Okay. So design. How do you go about designing one of these processes? We start with a process definition. Okay. So this is exactly how this process works from beginning to end. Okay. And once we get that, and that is the most difficult part of doing a piece of automation, is nailing down and getting everybody to agree in a massive corporation what exactly this process is supposed to do, because very often people at one end think it does one thing and at the other end think it does something else. And nailing that down, and we need to get all the relevant sign-off for that, and understand what different routes the robots can take. So as in our programming languages, the same as our out-of-the-box software, it's going to go through a bunch of if and else statements to build up its logic. Okay, and that is in its truest form. So that's when you boil it right down to its Boolean logic. Okay, development. Before we start any of this, we have to produce a design. Okay, and a piece of RPA design is very, very different, and this is where we branch off from traditional programming, okay? We have a lot more, we have more to think about and we have less to think about as well. So where primarily is this going to be based? So what estate is this going to run on? Is it going to be desktop automation? Is it going to be headless automation? What type of systems is it going to interact with? Is it going to be silent? Is it something that is simply a point and click? And so on. Testing. Testing is something that can be very, very difficult with automation, because how do you test something that is going to run very, very differently in many, many different scenarios, okay? So the permutations for the testing are going to have to match the design that we had initially for the process, right? That makes sense, okay? However, there's more to test as well. So we also have to understand that what happens in cases of application exceptions. In traditional programming, okay, we're going to have our tries and our catch blocks and so on. In RPA software, we have to decide what it's going to do under those circumstances. What state are we going to put the system back into? Are we going to restate the database that it's interacting with? And all that sort of stuff. Okay? And our go live. Usually our go live, because we are talking about something that has the potential to do an awful lot of damage to an organization's systems, we have to be very careful with the go live. Go live generally is a ramped up go live that we are going to produce based on what a full caseload is going to be. It's usually about a third, a half, 3/4, and then a full caseload. And each one of those is individually tested to make sure that we're happy with it. And then we can move into the warranty piece of the jigsaw where we then hand it back to the client. Okay, an example process. So in not a dissimilar way that we would look at a UML diagram for a standard piece of software, we would do pretty much the same thing with a process. So this one here is a data entry one. So this is quite a simplistic process that we're looking at here. So this is simply checking to see if we have an email in an inbox. If the email has the relevant file, we validate the file, we load the data, and then we work the data through various decision points in the process. Now, one misconception that I didn't have on the other slide is that you can automate, you can produce a bunch of automated processes without a database, that you don't need any other software to do it. This is not true. You are always going to want to know what your robots are doing. You're always going to want them to read and write from a flavor of database. Okay, so in some of the vendors that we'll look at, things like Blue Prism and UiPath, the generally preferred solution is Microsoft SQL Server. However, you're not limited to that. You can read and write from pretty much any database. Okay, so I was going to show you a small video here. I suppose I'll do it over this way. Let's have a look. See, can I get this working? No. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you have to watch this because I pay good money for it. So what we're going to look at now, I believe, is a typical the beginnings of an RPA process. Okay, so we're in a Windows environment here. We're looking at a robot that's reading a CSV programmatically from a downloaded email. I'm running through what typically would be described as a bunch of macros that are put together to define logic that log into and put information onto a system. So this is on our Sonic software testing system. So we have, I wrote a whole system complete with the kind of strange things that can happen in systems that may confuse a robot and so on to train people on. So essentially, what this has done is it's read a line of a CSV, loaded it from a database, logged it, popped it back off, and is now entering it into the source system. Okay. This is an insurance type of robot, so this is actually checking insurance details. So this is now opening Internet Explorer. It's going to type in a registration number, and it's going to verify against a registration database on the internet, and then write that back to the system, and then essentially move on to the next one. You can see that very, very quickly we're in a place now where we have a large amount of data being put into a system very, very quickly. Okay, useful information going into a system very, very quickly. Generally, you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see it working that way. You would never see something like that happening. That would run probably over many, many VMs and would just churn away throughout the day and night, just popping that information in and making decisions based on that. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we have another one here, I think, that does a similar job. Okay, so this one is done using something called UiPath. UiPath is a piece of automation software that's been around for a few years now that is emerging as quite a powerful piece of software, especially for the financial services industry and for healthcare as well. This video is covering Excel, so this is reading data from an Excel file, popping it into Internet Explorer, and looking up certain pieces of information on the internet. So this one, I suppose, is initially designed to show you screen scraping rather than screen entry. So not only can you use these type of out-of-the-box pieces of software to enter information, but you can also use it to retrieve information as well. Now, a lot of these videos will be slowed down so we can see what they're doing. Another misconception about RPA software is that it's faster. It's not faster, it's only as fast as the system will allow you to be. Okay, so if you have a paralyzingly slow insurance system that takes a long time to load a screen, well, it's going to take a long time to put the information in and get the information out again. And that's, at that point, you would question whether or not you would go down a traditional ETL route to load information in, and a typical SQL route to extract the information out again. Okay, so I shall move on to the next one. Okay, so how does this affect us? You know, it's funny because I suffer from a very similar thing that most developers suffer from, in that, you know, that's not really development, is it? It's not really that innovative, and it's not really that clever. Okay, I know that, and you guys probably know that as well. A lot of the people in the industries don't know that because all they're interested in is saving money. Okay, we can benefit too, though. Okay, so all of the vendors out there will advertise that this is all out-of-the-box software, that you don't need to be technical to be able to get along with it. Okay, and that is the case for very, very simple processes and very, very simple automation. However, when you start to get into cognitive and artificial intelligence and machine learning, I don't like the term artificial intelligence in this context because I come from the Turing school of AI. What they're talking about when people mention AI in terms of robotics, they're talking about statistic-driven machine learning. Okay, so that is making strategic decisions based on statistics in your database. Okay, that's where we come in. Okay, so a company has built a few robots. They're happy that they haven't had to shell out on a large-scale IT project. It's a bit of glue until there is a budget available to upgrade their systems, and they're happy. But when they do need us, and when they do need a good developer, is when we start to look at cognitive, and when we start to look at machine-driven learning, okay? And that's important. So you will always need developers behind all this stuff, okay? Maybe not at the beginning. Maybe the out-of-the-box software will work very nicely as a stopgap, but eventually they will need us, okay? So why would we not just program it to begin with? Well, I couldn't agree more. But not everybody is developer. These are prefabricated to make build time quicker, okay? So in the same way as you might use a class in an object-oriented program, you have prefabricated components that are literally drag and drops from a UI that's supplied by a vendor, okay? And those vendors specialize in different services, okay? Again, cheaper than a large-scale IT project, easily maintained, and that's an important one as well. So you don't generally find, once these are built, you don't generally find that they break down very often. So there is a lot of robust behavior involved when these are deployed. Okay? So what's different about the build? Well, the build is usually quicker. I say usually because sometimes it's not. It's usually quicker because usually we're going to take a bunch of prefabricated components and put them together to build a process that a company has outlined. Okay. However, there is a lot that out-of-the-box software can't do. Okay. Same test dev lifecycle. Far more adaptable, absolutely. It is far more adaptable to a business. It's far more adaptable to ourselves, maybe not. And it's easily changed at short notice. Okay. So let's look at vendors. We've got automation. These are the bigger vendors. There's a lot of vendors out there. Okay, and these are just some of the ones that I had a look at for this. So we've got automation anywhere. Front and back office. It's got a client-based control center. It's mainly script-based. Something that is common amongst automation anywhere and UiPath is this thing called a macro recorder. So you can actually record your own screen movements and your own keystrokes on a system. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I've never really used it very often. Back office only for Blue Prism. It's a client-based control center. It's got a visual process design studio, and that's what makes it very attractive. So Blue Prism was one of the first generation pieces of RPA software that became very, very popular because of a visual process design studio. So in a similar fashion, to an integration services package that you might build in SQL Server, it's a very similar way of doing it. So you have a bunch of pre-built components that you can drag and drop over. UiPath emerging at the moment as one of the very fast-growing ones, very adaptable. Very clever. It's got a web-based control center, the same visual process design studio. It's the one that I recommend usually for businesses to use in most cases. The reason being is it meets both needs. Okay, so it meets the business need in terms of ease of use. So there's a lot of drag and drop functionality that you can use in UiPath that a business analyst can use to build a process. However, the big difference between UiPath and the others is that you can invoke PowerShell scripts, and you can invoke your own custom code components as well. So it meets nicely with the needs of a developer as well. okay? In the way that we can put together our traditional programs and invoke them from the UiPath suite of products. Okay. Looking at the Forrester Wave report, we can see here that we've got, these are the ones we were talking about, Automation Anywhere, UiPath and Blue Prism. We've got Work Fusion down there. NICE is another emerging one that's coming up more often at the moment in terms of companies asking about it. I've not done much with NICE. They bundle their own consultancy firm along with it. So in general, I wouldn't have much to do with NICE. Okay, so we're going to have a very quick look at UiPath. Okay, and UiPath being the most versatile one that I can see. We won't have a look at another video, but however, we will look at its Process Studio. Okay, and this is what it looks like. So anybody who has seen SQL Server integration services will be very familiar with this type of setup. So when I was at Microsoft, I worked as an under-the-hood SSIS developer, and at the same time, although I didn't know, the chaps that went on to build UiPath were working, doing a similar job in the States, I believe. You can see here that this is practically built to be sold back to Microsoft, so it wouldn't surprise me if it ends up back in the Microsoft suite of products. However, down here you've got a bunch of predefined activities. You've got a workflow pane, you've got a properties pane and an output pane. Okay, so for this to work, you're simply dragging across your components from here. Okay, and if you build any of your own components as well, you can do the same thing, okay? Pop them in your main flow, start from the top, and down it goes. It comes with, it's built in a similar fashion to any other programming language, with each component passing its own arguments to and fro, and then its own components having its own local variables as well. Again, nicely put together, I believe, because it satisfies both types of user. Okay. It then also comes with a piece of orchestration software. So once we do a build in the studio, okay, we're then going to deploy that to a virtual machine essentially, or a bunch of virtual machines based on what the quota for line item is for this particular robot. Now, at the top level, we end up, and this is the case with all the vendors, we end up with a top-level piece of orchestration software that essentially runs the robots for us, okay? And we're going to see that all of these processes can be queued up and they can be scheduled, and we can get the same MI. We can use Kibana and Elasticsearch to be able to get our MI back from our SQL database. So it's bundled with a very nice bunch of features to be able to use it. And this is what our orchestrator looks like. So if you can imagine a company that has quite a vast robotic capability may have an awful lot of robots listed down there. Okay, and these are going to be scheduled and run based on rules, based on times, or based on manual push and play sorts of things. Again, we use the same variables and arguments to store the data. Name, data type, scope, and default value the same way as you would with the vast majority of programming languages. I'm going to move on slightly from this, and this presentation was initially designed to teach this subject at length. So we have pretty much the same data types that you would expect to find in any language. Okay, and we go a little bit more in depth into that. Now, reporting has always been slightly problematic in RPA. So UiPath and a lot of the other vendors have come up with a lovely reporting schedule that we can look at. You could hook your reporting services, if you were of the Microsoft vein, straight into your SQL Server, or if it was Oracle, you could use the Oracle reporting suite. Reporting in general is going to be as a line item with 3 statuses: success, application, or business exception. Okay. And that's it, guys. The rest of this is very much about case studies, and we go into Blue Prism as well in this particular deck. I am going to be with DirectPL at stand 7 for the rest of the day. If anybody wants this presentation, and it is quite lengthy in terms of RPA, feel free to give us a shout, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have, or provide this presentation back to you. Okay, and that's it, guys. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good rest of the afternoon.